Hello and welcome to Discover Dorico in September 2024 for the second time. Today's session is an introduction to Dorico for Finale users. We'll look at some note input options, some features that are similar to Finale and some that are different in Dorico. My colleagues will be monitoring the live chat. If you have questions, please put them in there. I've added some links in the description below this video to useful resources, and I'll point those out as we go through this session as well. But if you're looking for something, if you open the description section at the bottom, then you should be able to find some links in there to things like getting started, guides and things like that. This session will always be available on this same URL link. So if you're in a web browser, that link at the top above there, it'll be available on that same link. So you can pause, rewind or come back and catch up at any time on this session. After the session, I'll add chapter links so you can skip to specific things that we've talked about. If they aren't there yet, then you may be watching live, or maybe they just take a little while to update, so please come back later. And don't forget, on YouTube, you can click on the cog for settings such as playback speed, so you can speed me up or slow me down, as well as use the shortcut K to pause, J to go back a few seconds, and L to skip forward to catch up. Please also subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to be notified of other videos and live streams that we do. Let's get started. So I can see there's lots of people in the chat, as I said, and I know my colleagues are going to be answering those as well. This is going to be a similar session, as I said, to the one we did last week, but I'm also going to show you a couple of other things from some of the comments that we had last time, so there'll be some slight differences in this one. And also maybe a little sneak preview of something that you might like. So let's show you a few things on here. So I said there'd be a few resources and things as well. So let's pop me in the bottom corner. So there's a getting started guide here. If you're just starting out with Dorico for the very first time, then I can recommend this page. This is blog.dorico.com/getting started. As I said, it's in the description. I'm just going to pop this in the chat as well, in case you want this link. There we go. So this getting started page has a bunch of useful resources if you're just thinking about trying Dorico for the first time. So there's some videos here which are about initially installing Dorico, especially as a crossgrade from Finale and how that works. It then goes into a couple of other videos on that playlist as well. But then there's a first steps guide. This is a really useful introduction into how to do things in Dorico. So it's a complete kind of hand-holding exercise. You can have it as an online web help or download the PDF, or you can do a video follow-along of all of the things in this session. And it will take you through doing a piano piece and adding articulations and slurs and various other things in that. And then there's also a blues example, so there's some rhythmic examples of things like drums and other notation and chords and things like that as well. So the first steps guide is a really good place to start instead of kind of diving in with importing files or doing anything else. I think a guided example of that kind of thing would be useful. And of course today's session, when I'll show you some of the things about the basics of how Dorico works as well. On this page there's also underneath there a Learn Dorico in 11 minutes, which you may have seen from an email that we've sent on. You can try Dorico for yourself, thank you. There's a Getting Started with Dorico SE. This is actually a useful guide for any version of Dorico, and will teach you lots of the things that you would need to get started in a series of little videos if you prefer to learn that way as well. And then there's a note input tutorials playlist as well. So if you click on this or this button at the bottom, it will take you through a playlist of all sorts of note input type things. We'll cover some of those basics today, but there's a lot more detail in that one as well. So that's the note input guide. And then there's also a section at the bottom on some shortcuts and things. So there's a resources link here, and there are these shortcut cards that you can download and put on your desk, or you can have it as a poster if you like it. We call it a quick reference card for lots of shortcuts. These kind of things. So if you want to use one of those, you can download these in various different formats. There's also this, which was originally designed as a mouse mat. Some people put it on the wall as a little poster of shortcuts of kind of things that you might want to remember and how to do things in Dorico. So I'll go through a few of these, like I said, in the session today as well. And then there's also some other links on here. So things like playback templates. If you want to use the Garritan sounds that you already have in Finale, then you can download the Jazz and Big Band, or there's a link here to the GPO5 playback templates for those as well. So you can easily switch into using those. And also, towards the end of this session, we'll also talk a bit about MusicXML export and import. So how to get files from other programs like Finale into Dorico. So this getting started going, I said I put the link in the chat there, is a very good page for kind of all of the basic information you'd want to get started with Dorico and feel more comfortable using it. So there's like I said, my colleagues will be answering things in the chat as well. So if you've got any questions as we go, then please use those. So when you first start Dorico, once you've got it installed, you should have this Steinberg Hub. And this has a number of sections. The first one is a Learn section here. And the Learn section has a number of videos and things, for example, the one we looked at last week, and some of the other things in here. There's some Tips Tuesdays. Some of the videos are also in German as well, so if you want some in some other languages, they'll be in there. There's some hands-on tutorials in here as well, if you want to learn about how to use Dorico in the program itself. And there's also links to our forum and the manual. So if you're looking for something, you can just Google it, and it will come up with our online help, because the manual is an online help. But also that link will take you straight into the manual if you want to look for something in there. And then there's the forum. So if you want to chat to us directly and chat to some of our other developers, then you can do that in the forum and maybe pass on ideas or have questions of how to do things. There's also articles in here from our blog, so you can keep up to date with things we're doing. This is also where you'll find your recent projects if you worked on things previously, and where you'll find the Create New section that I'm going to use now, so that you can create a new project in Dorico. Excuse me. So to start off with, we have these templates. You can add your own templates, so I've added a personal section down here. So if you, as you progress with Dorico, if you decide actually there's a particular setup that you want to do, there are ways of importing and exporting styles and that kind of thing. But if there's a particular setup you use a lot, and a particular set of instruments maybe, then you can add those to your own template as well. So you get a number of different sections in here with different things. So choir with SATB with piano and that kind of thing, with organ. I'm just going to start with an empty page to start off with. So I'm going to start from the very beginning and show you adding some instruments as well. On the right hand side here, we've got spaces where you can add the project title and composer. So let's call this one Monday's project, unless, as somebody pointed out, you're in Australia. And the composer, I'll put me. I don't know if I said, my name's John, so welcome. You can set the page size. Mine's set to A4 just because of the location where I am. Obviously, I'm in the UK. So yours may be set to letter size or something else from here. And you can also set the page orientation. And the rastral size is the staff size. So a 7mm staff is a fairly standard default. There's also this option for project will use multiple flows. We'll look at flows in a bit more detail later, but I'm going to tick that box to remind me to look at multiple flows. Flows are independent sections of music, so it could be movement 1 and movement 2 and movement 3. They could be individual flows. It could be song 1, song 2, song 3. It could just be the user flow as an idea space. So we'll look at some of these options and how you might use those in Dorico if you want them. If you're not going to use flows, if you're just going to have one project file is one piece that you're working on, just untick the box. You don't need, and it will remove some of the options for that. But you can add them later if you need to. The music font is here as well, so that's our standard music font, but you can also choose other options such as Finale options in here if you want to start with a Finale music font. And also the text fonts are here, so you can choose any of the text fonts on your system that you want to use as your start. You can configure all the different styles of things. This is your kind of base text font and style that you can use. There's also an option here for the time signature and key signature. If you don't want them, you can leave those and turn those off completely. Dorico can start open meter and no time signature if you want to, but we'll just start with C and 4/4 and 32 bars. So I'll press Create Project, and we'll get an empty project, and Dorico will ask me, so which instruments would you like to use? But in actual fact, we say which players do you want to use? So players is because we're talking about the people you're going to give the music to start off with, and you might have two slightly different types of players. You can have a single player who's a soloist, so they're, for example, a flute player who doubles on piccolo, or a reed player who's maybe playing, clarinet, flute, saxophone, all sorts of things. And then you can also have a section player, and a section player is like a string section or maybe a choir. where you write one part, but there are actually multiple first violins playing that, or there are multiple sopranos in the choir singing that. So Dorico will give you a different sound for that. It will give you more of a section group sound for those instruments if you choose them, whereas this one is a single player. Also for the section ones, they have options such as Divisi that we'll look at. So there's a Divisi feature in Dorico, and section players can make use of that. Whereas for single players, they wouldn't need Divisi unless you're cutting your people in two. But what you can do is they can double on more than one instrument. So those single players get other options that way. So it's an important distinction at the beginning, and one of the first things you might ask. So I thought I'd better say. So I'm just going to add, for example, some single players here. So I'll add a single player. I'm just going to type the word piano. It saves me searching through the families of instruments. And if I just press enter, then it will add that piano to the part here. Or to the score, I should say. If you want to add other players, now this thing's disappeared in the middle. On the bottom left corner here, you've got options to add a single player and also to add section players. And there's also an add ensembles option. So if you want to add more than one player all at the same time, groups of players that you've created or that we've created, you can add those from there as well. So it's very quick to add other players when you need them. So let's say, for example, we want to add a few more things. So I'm going to add a soprano singer. Dorico's sorting these into an order. There's a button down here to do orders of things as well, so if you don't want an order you can turn that off. You can drag these players around if you want to resort the order, but Dorico will put them in orchestral order to start off with. So when I add a drum kit, for example, it's going to put it in somewhere else depending on where I want to put things, and I can resort and drag things, and I can say to Dorico, actually, look, now don't sort those automatically. So you can choose which order you want things in, just drag these little cards around for the various types of players. And you can add multiple players very quickly in this one. So if you wanted to, for example, add string players into here, you can do them individually. So you can add an individual violin. You can have shortcuts if you want them to add second players, and you can just type the names of the other instruments you want, or you can add a section. There's all sorts of options. Oh, I didn't mean Celeste. I'll undo that. There we go, there's a cello. So you can add other players, and they're all now listed here on the page. So like I said, you can set the order of things, you can just drag them around, and you can see that here I've added some which are section players, and I've added some which are solo players. So if you make this mistake, you can easily add an empty-handed player, and you can also drag these instruments down to other players as well, so you can change these and make soloists into section players and vice versa if you need to. And all of these, then, if you don't want them, there's a little bin. So it's all very sortable, customizable for all of the things that you want. So now I've got double-headed players, section players for my strings, solo players for all of these. So there you go. So now we're in setup mode to start off with. So I'm going to use a fair number of shortcuts today. I'm not expecting you to learn them all from the very beginning. But like I said, from our resources pages, and if I bring up this little thing here, there are links at the bottom to the resources here, the shortcut cards and posters, and they're in the description underneath this video. So these quick reference cards will have the shortcuts on, and for example this one shows you the screen I'm now working with. So these modes that I have here, setup, write, engrave, play and print, they're all command or control 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they're control on PC and they're command on Mac. So when I'm in setup mode here, I can use a shortcut of command 2 because I'm on a Mac to get to write mode, and I can use command 1 to get back to setup mode if I want to. So in setup mode we also have these flows sections at the bottom, which we'll come back to, and the layouts on the right hand side, which are all the scores and parts. Somebody did ask in the comments before, so I'll just do this quickly now while I think about it. If you wanted to make a part which was, for example, the soprano and the piano, then you can do that because you can choose over here, for example, the layout, and then you can tick whoever's going to be in it. So I could tick here the soprano as well, and now I have a soprano and piano. But if you want a separate part for piano and you want a combined one, you can make new layouts here. So now I have an empty part, and I can add the soprano and the piano to it, and I can sort the order of these as well. So now I've got a full score, I've got a soprano part, a piano part, a soprano and piano part, and all of the other parts underneath it. And those are all selectable at any point. So for example, when I'm in write mode here, I've got the drop down for all my scores and parts. So you can see the one I've just made here, and you can see the other ones. And the multi-rests will be turned on by default, and they're not turned on in the score. So as we write music in the score, it will then populate the parts automatically. You can turn multi-rests on and off at any point. You don't need to create them. You can just turn them on and off as and when you need them. So let's look at some note input options. Now, when you first start using Dorico, you'll find that when you start note input, and there's a few ways of doing it, you can double click on a staff. And here I've got a little ghost note. So you can use the mouse if you want to, and you can just click on the music here, click on the staff here, and it will input that note. So you can choose wherever you want it to be, and you can see at the top here, I'm going to turn this mouse off, hang on a second. I'm going to turn my mouse off. So you can use the mouse if you want to. It's not the quickest way of doing it. You can turn off that audition option if you don't want it. So when it's moving up and down, if you don't want to hear those notes as you're doing it, you can turn that off as well. It's very customizable for the note inputs to get it the way you want it. But you will find that mouse input, for example, is on by default, and I personally would recommend turning it off. And you can do that in the preferences. So in Dorico, you can go to preferences here on a Mac, or on a PC, it's in the edit menu, and then go to preferences. Or you can use this little arrow here on the left-hand side, and this little select arrow, if you turn it off, then you would be able to do mouse input. And if you have the select arrow, then it's more about selecting items on the page rather than doing note input from them. So as I said, to do note input, I could double-click on the staff here, and I get this caret line here. Or carré, if you're French, I suppose. And you also get this rhythm grid across the top. So Dorico is showing me in any of these bars, if I double-click in this one, where the strong and the weak beats are. I'm in 4/4 at the moment. And the rhythm grid is set in the bottom left corner down here. So you can change this. If you want to change the rhythm grid to something else like 16ths, then you can do so. So you have that, you can tell exactly where you want to be. Now, you don't need to enter rests in Dorico. Most of the time, you can just let Dorico do its thing and enter rests as and when it needs them. You can also use the arrow keys. If I use the arrow keys left and right, you see I can move around in the bar. And there's also a shortcut of Command or Control and the arrow keys to move into other bars. So you can easily move around into other bits where you want them. Now, the default system in Dorico is to do the duration first and then the pitch, but we can switch it round as well to do pitch before duration. So very quickly I'll show you the kind of default and how you might want to change it, especially if you've been using Finale. So we have this caret line here, and I have the durations here on the left-hand side. The durations also, because I'm going to switch to using some keyboard shortcuts, if I just turn this option on here, the note durations are these notes across the top. Sorry, these numbers across the top. So 9, a big number, is a big duration, and as it goes down, then it gets smaller. So you can go 9, 8, 7, and you can see the buttons are changing on the left-hand side on the screen. They're just above my head. So you can touch type with these numbers. I suppose a clearer graphical example of this is probably to show you this screen again. So here at the top you can see the numbers correspond with the note lengths. Now I know they're different from the Finale ones. You can also use the numeric keypad if you want to, but again Dorico is different to the Finale ones. Ours do make sense, there's a good reason why we've done them. You can change our shortcuts. I don't recommend doing it on day one to change our shortcuts, because I think it makes the program a little less intuitive to learn if you're changing a bunch of things, but just know that the options are there if you want to change shortcuts. But anyway, so the idea is that you can touch type, because if you have your finger over one key and you move to the left, then you know that you're on a shorter duration, and if you go to the right, then you're on a longer duration. So it can make it very quick to touch type things. So I can choose a note duration, for example, I can choose a crotchet, and then I can press the letters A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and that's one way of inputting notes, if you want to do it that way. And when you press A, it will jump to the next closest A, and there are shortcuts for moving those notes around, so you can move the notes if you want to if you want to move them around to somewhere else. You can move them if you want to with the mouse, so I can drag it with the mouse. You can also drag things to the left and right, so I can move this note into another bar, or I can move it back along the rhythm grid slightly if I want to. And Dorico will then tie it over, so it knows that the note is a crotchet or a quarter note in length, but depending on where it sits in the bar, for example this one, it will update and potentially show you with ties or not. It means it's really quick, because I don't need to enter ties very often in Dorico. You can just put in a note, and then Dorico will work out how that should work. Now, if that's not exactly what you want, to start off with when you're putting notes in, just keep putting notes in, because sometimes the rules change depending on how many notes there are in the bar, whether or not it's followed by a rest or a note. There are various options. So there is some options in the library menu for notation options. And in here, there's lots of rules for all sorts of things, including note grouping and how the note groupings will work. So that's what Dorico's using, all of these options. They've got some nice pretty pictures, so you can click on the option that you want and set those. And that's a really good global option, a global way of setting the things that you want to happen. There are then things that you can override them. You might hear, for example, on our forum or Facebook, somebody will say, oh, you should use forced duration. So there are options to override some of those settings, but don't fight against Dorico all the time and get really frustrated with it. There's either a global option to change it often, or you can use an override option. So just know that they exist. Now, for doing other note input type things, and actually another thing you'll notice, of course, is the pages here. We've got a page set up. If you prefer using the scroll view that you had in Finale, then we have a very similar option in Dorico called Galley view. The quickest way is probably to use this button down here. So in the bottom of the screen down here, we've got Galley view. And there's page view here as well. There's also a couple of options to the left of it. One is a box and one is the hand tool. So this means that if I use the box, when I click and drag on the score, then I can select things this way, which is one way of selecting things. If I use the hand tool, then it means that when I click and drag on the score, I can move the page around. So if you're used to moving the page around that way, you might prefer that tool, and you can change the two options down here. I don't use that one because I also have a trackpad, so I use the trackpad for zooming, and there are other shortcuts for zooming as well. In fact, in the bottom right hand corner there's also some zoom settings and other page controls and things down there as well. So this is Galley view, and you can also switch it with a shortcut, of course, so you can switch back to page view and Galley view, and you can input music this way. So selecting things, you can click between a couple of notes. You can also choose one note and then hold down Shift and click on another note and select all of those notes in case you wanted to move them all, maybe an octave, or to move them diatonically, or to do something else with them. So you've got all sorts of options that you can do with selections. Now, if you want to do note input in a more Finale type way, so you want to do pitch before the duration, I'll turn on this little caret line. There's other ways of turning that on. I double-clicked again, but you can also use the Enter key. So now this rest is selected. If I press Enter, then it will turn the caret line on, and I can also press Escape to turn it off again. So some people prefer that method of kind of Enter and Escape, and some people like to toggle it with the same Enter key. So when the caret line is on, of course, I can input notes. When the caret line isn't on, then I'm editing notes. Now I'm going to switch this over. So there's a button here, which is pitch before duration, and the shortcut for that is K. So now when I'm doing this, I can now use the arrows to move that ghost note up and down. I'm just using the arrow keys. Now, if you've been using Dorico before, you'll say, hang on a minute, I can't do that. So I'll let you into a little secret. There's a little update coming soon for Dorico. So I'm using a pre-released version, if you like, and that one has this option so that you can just use the arrow keys for note input. So the idea here is you can use the arrow keys, you can choose the pitch that you want here with the arrow keys, and you can just then choose, for example, so I can use the arrow key to move, and I can use a note duration this way. So if you prefer working that way, then that's a little update. One of the things that you will probably need to do is go into Dorico Preferences, and in here the key commands is what we call our shortcuts. So you can't do this today, but you will be able to do it soon. I don't know when exactly, but you will be able to do this soon. You'll be able to search for shadow for the shadow note, and in the note input section you'll be able to set shortcuts for lowering the shadow note by step and raising the shadow note by step. So you'll be able to do that so that you can then do the note input in a more Finale type of way, so that you can do the pitch before duration, and you can move the shadow note first, and then you can just choose a note duration that way. I will say you can also use the letters A to G if you want to, because that's in many cases quicker, but only of course if you're used to doing that method, because it's a lot of key presses sometimes to get to exactly where you want to be. But if that's a useful method for what you're doing, maybe you're traveling on a train, that kind of thing, maybe that's another useful input method. I would say probably one of the fastest input methods really is to use a MIDI keyboard if you have one. It doesn't matter what size it is. I'm going to turn off the pitch before duration for a second and show you this way. So I'm going to move into this new bar here. If you have a MIDI keyboard, I've got one here. It doesn't matter what the size is. I'm going to do the standard Dorico option, which is to choose a duration first. And then if I press notes on here, I can also, of course, press accidentals, which are much quicker. The accidentals are 0 for natural, minus and equals, because it has a little plus on it as well. In fact, let me just show you that on this one here. So you can see 0, minus and equals. So that's how you can do some accidentals as well if you need to. They're also on this panel on the left hand side, so if you want to use them from here you can use them with a mouse. But a MIDI keyboard means this is going to be really quick, because you can now also do things like chords and that kind of thing. Let me move that back a little bit. And I think that's probably going to be the fastest way of inputting notes, is to use your left hand to use the numbers across the top here, and your right hand on a MIDI keyboard to enter anything that you want to use. And it doesn't matter if you're doing pitch before duration or duration before pitch. You can press K and you can cycle between these two methods, so you can get exactly the option you want and then choose your duration if you want to do it that way. It doesn't matter which way you're doing it, but I think a MIDI keyboard is probably going to be very quick. Another useful thing you can do in either method is some people would like the option of kind of entering these notes and then exploding them out onto some other instruments, so maybe the strings that we have at the bottom here. Well, Dorico has that option. You can select these notes. You can use the cut, copy, paste method. So there's a cut and copy option, same shortcuts that you'd have in Microsoft Word, and you can then paste them into the strings. But there's a paste special option, and this includes things like explode and reduce. So if you want to explode them out to other instruments, or you have written the music for strings and you want to do a keyboard reduction, you can use the reduce option just by using the paste option. No plugins required, it's just there in the menu. But if you know that's what you wanted to start off with, you know you wanted to write for strings to start off with, then when you turn the caret line on here, if you hold down the shift key and use the down arrow to extend that over the others, the other instruments, then when you play 4-note chords, then you will get those notes written for all of those instruments. So if you play 4-note chords, it will divide them up. If you play solo lines, then they'll all get exactly the same notes. So it's a really quick input method for doing those kind of things, if you know that's what you're going to be writing for. There's also options in Dorico for things like insert mode. There's some videos we have on our channel on this, and like I said, a lot of this is covered in Anthony's note input videos. So if you go to that Getting Started link on here, scroll down from the top of the page and look at these note input videos. There's loads and loads of detail in these videos about this, but let me very quickly show you an example. Insert mode is for I've made a mistake in some cases. So when you've got the caret line on here, for example, let's say we're going to put it in the middle of this bar, and I want to input some more notes here. If I press I for insert mode, or there's a little option over here on the left hand side, so you can now input notes into the middle of this bar. So instead of cutting these out and pasting them later, or dragging them or moving them out the way, you can just say in here, it's like in Microsoft Word when you've made a typo, and you click in the middle of the word and you add another letter and it makes space for that extra letter. Dorico is going to do the same. So I'm going to choose a note duration, I'm going to play some more notes, and Dorico is just pushing those notes out of the way to make space for exactly what we need. And you can do this as much as you need. If you make a mistake, you play too many notes and you didn't want them, you can press backspace, delete, and you can delete those notes. So that can be a really quick method. So I for insert mode, and there's various ways you can use insert mode. It can also be used for editing. So let's say you've inputted these notes here, but actually you wanted to do all of these notes. You could drag a box, or I'm just going to hold down shift, select, pardon me, and select all of those. If insert mode is on, so I press I, this little thing lights up, I can now make these notes longer without deleting anything else, and it will kind of play around with time, make all those notes longer and shorter for exactly what I need. So insert mode is a really powerful tool when you're inputting notes or when you're editing. There's also some other really useful things, like if you're inputting a note and you want to tie it into the next bar, there's a shortcut to just make a note longer. It makes it longer along the rhythm grid. The rhythm grid was this option at the top here that I showed you at the beginning. And that was set down here. So it's making it longer by an 1/8 note. So if you add a note into this bar and then you want to make it shorter by an 1/8 note, you don't need to add, well, in this case, a double dotted note. And yes, you can decide if you want double dotted notes or not. It's in the preferences. Whether you agree with them or not, that's fine. If you don't, go to library and engraving options, and you can set all of these kind of options for whether you want these. Like I said, there's also notation options for these kind of things, and you can set all of those options up. But when you make the note shorter, it's now deciding whether or not ties should be included, and I'm making the note even longer. Now, so for example, you don't need to enter a whole note tied to a half note tied to an 1/8 note. You can just add basically one note that's close to what you want and use these shortcuts. If you want to know, it's Option Shift or Alt Shift, depending on your Mac or PC, and you can make the notes longer or shorter. And then you can also use Option or Alt to move notes. So I can move this note around in the bar, and Dorico's correctly notating it depending on where it sits in the bar. Alt is basically your move key, or Option. It depends if you're on a Mac or PC. Some old Macs say Alt, some say Option these days. PCs tend to say Alt, but it's the same key. So that key, if you hold it down and use the arrow keys, I can diatonically move a note up and down. If I use Shift as well, I can move it chromatically. And Option and the left and right arrows will move it along the rhythm grid. So it's really flexible to move notes around. There's also shortcuts if you want them to move notes to the staff below, to copy to the staff below. You can have a shortcut if you want it. It's a really flexible system for note input, but there are lots of differences with how things work. One of these options for kind of this is one note, and that's because in Dorico, if I just open the properties panel at the bottom down here, you see there's a tiny little arrow at the bottom here. That's this lower zone. And this actually starts with the properties panel down here. There's a shortcut for it, of course, Command 8, or Control 8 on PC. Now we're down here, there's options also for note input with a keyboard. So if you want to, you can click on a MIDI keyboard and you can input notes using this if you want to. Any notes you have selected will be highlighted on here, whether it's chords or not. They will be highlighted on the keyboard as well. So you can use that for note input. If you're a guitarist, there's a fretboard for note input. If you're a drummer, there's a drum pads for note input. There's a mixer you can display down here if you want it. And then there's also this key editor. Now, the key editor is like using what's known as a DAW, a digital audio workstation. We're not dealing with audio, we're dealing with MIDI, but they get called DAWs. Not the open, anyway. So this is showing me all of the notes here that I've input as blobs. And you can see we've got a piano down here, and you can edit things this way. Now, in this world, this is one note, but really, to the player who's playing that's one note. And in Dorico, that's one note. So you don't need to think about that as three notes anymore, tied together. It's one note. And when you choose one note, Dorico knows that's one note. You can make it shorter down here in the key editor if you want to, and you can make it longer down here if you want to, and Dorico will just adjust it automatically. You can drag this around if you want to, and again Dorico will move it to wherever it needs to be in the bar. So you can make all sorts of edits down here. If you're really into MIDI controls for things, you can do all of your controls and everything you need down here. There's a velocity editor down here. You can also add other options for CC controls, which are often used for dynamics and various things. There's a tempo option, there's the dynamics options, all sorts of things down there. So this key editor can be a really useful tool. I'm not going to go into it in a massive way today, but this kind of shows you, the one note concept. And while I'm here, because somebody asked in the chat before, when you want to do things like, for example, add articulations, they're over here in this panel. So if I add these two articulations, Dorico knows which end the articulations would commonly go. Again, there are preferences. If you want to change exactly where they sit, just change the global preferences. Don't fight with them individually. There are individual commands for things in the properties panel. So down here, if you needed to, you can change where the articulations are going to be. What happens, though, with things that you want to put in the middle? Things like dynamics and that kind of thing. So let's enter some dynamics and then look at how we would do them in the middle. So if I want to enter some dynamics, for example, over here in the violin part, I can use these panels on the right-hand side for lots of things. So down the right-hand side, we've got clefs, and we've got key signatures and time signatures and meter, and we've got a dynamics panel. So I could click on something from here, and because this note's selected, it would add that to that position. I can also choose, so I can do it this way if I want to, and if nothing is selected, I can have the option of selecting something here. You see it's now attached to my mouse, and I can place it there. But it's not necessarily the quickest way of doing it, because you're doing all of the instruments individually at that point. So also what you can do, if I just press delete, I'm going to choose this one and press delete again to delete that one. You can also enter things with a popover. So if I want to do the same thing with a popover, I can press Shift D. What's a popover? This is a popover. Why was it Shift D? So let's just have a look at our shortcuts list again. Down the right hand side here, all of these things here are Shift plus something. So C for clefs, K for key signatures, M for meter, T for tempo, D for dynamics. So they're all Shift something. So it's an intuitive, all those things on the right hand side are Shift something. So Shift D, and I get this little dynamics popover, and I can type, for example, MF or MP, he says, typing one thing and saying the other, MF, and then press enter, and I get MF on this one here, which means if I select this note here, down to this note here, horrible chord, then I can press Shift-D, and I can press, let's say MP this time, and it will add it for all of those instruments. I'm just going to press undo. If I do this over a range of notes, so let's say all of these notes, and press Shift-D, then when I do things like, say, P, a hairpin, which is the greater than, less than symbol, so it's shift and comma or period on your keyboard, and then say, for example, MF, and when I press enter, it will enter those dynamics for all those instruments over all of them at the same time. And they all get grouped and linked together as well. So the dynamics get grouped together on that particular instrument, and they get linked between all of the instruments. So when you make a change, you can ungroup them, you can unlink them. The simple way, if you just right-click, there are options for dynamics, and you can do things like ungrouping and unlinking, and there's a global preference. There's a global preference for all of these things so that it will change these things for you. Now we've got a nasty collision down here. Why is that? Well, that's because we're working in Galley view. In Galley view, we just set a standard gap between all of the instruments, and you can write from there. It's also because the cello really is quite high here, unexpectedly, because I'm terrible. If you go to page view, then Dorico will sort all the gaps and everything out for you, so you won't have that kind of problem. Oh, where is it? Here it is. So it will sort those out. But in Galley view, there is a preference in Galley view. If you want to increase the gaps for any of these, then you can do so if you need to for to change any of those. Or you could just actually write music that makes sense, which I'm not doing today. So I'm just going to bring those down an octave instead. The shortcut for down an octave, so Alt was the moving things, and Alt and Command or Alt and Control on PC is big, so that with the arrow keys can move things in octaves. Like that. So we've entered these dynamics, and they're kind of grouped and linked together. Now, if you want to enter a dynamic in the middle of a long note here, what you need to do is you can use the caret line. So I double click here, and you can move this around to be wherever you want it to be, and then wherever you want the dynamic to be, you can press Shift-D, and you can enter your dynamic and press enter, and you'll get a dynamic in the middle of these tied notes. So don't necessarily go, oh, I must click on the note to add a dynamic. Not necessarily. You want to be on the beat position where things go, and this can apply to lots of things. When you want them to be in a particular place in a bar, then you can use the rhythm grid here, set the caret where you want it, and then input something at that point, and that can apply to lots of things as well. Now, there's also other methods for things, of course. So very quickly, I've used the MIDI keyboard to enter chords, but if you don't have one and you want to enter chords, then you can also do other things. So I'm going to choose these notes here by choosing the beam at the top, and I'm going to hold down Shift and click on the beam at the top here, and that will select all of those notes. There's another method. I'm going to press Shift-I for the intervals popover. Now in this one, I can enter simple things like 3, 5, which will give me a third and a fifth. I'm just going to press undo. Or I can press Shift-I, and I can say things like, I'd like M3, -5, Org4, M7. And I can build up chords that way. So you can do augmented, diminished, minor, major, positive, negative for above and below, and you can build up chords that way if you want to. So you can use that intervals popover to enter things that way, kind of in a more, I suppose, it's kind of music theory rather than using a MIDI keyboard to enter it. So that's just another method. And again, once you have these notes in here, you could then decide that you want to explode them out onto another instrument or anything else, should you want to. So that's another option. There is also a live recording option. So there's a record button up here. So if you want to choose an instrument, the singer, the piano, doesn't matter, you can press this record button up here, and that'd be another way of inputting notes. It will give you a click for the metronome. You can get different types of click. So there's a metronome style one that's pitched, there's a woodblock one, and there's an unpitched one. So you can set the metronome you like, you can set how many bars counting you want, that kind of thing. You can play on your MIDI keyboard. I'm not going to do it right now. It's very boring watching people do MIDI recording. And then you can play things in, and then of course you can edit and tweak all the things afterwards once they're in there if you want to. There's other panels down here, so for trills and for repeat structures, tremolos, by the way, repeated notes, so you'll find them in the repeat structures. There's different types of bar lines. There's shortcuts for lots of these things as well. There's things like pauses. There's the playing techniques, so all sorts of playing techniques. And playing techniques, you can add your own. There's a little plus button in all of these sections. You can add your own. A playing technique can be a graphic, a symbol. It can be, you can import a graphic if you want to. It can be something from another font style. You know, if you've got another glyph that you want to use or some text that you want to use, you can make your own. You can also, for all of these, attach a playing meaning, a playback meaning to them. So, for example, consord will do something. Legato will do something. Even adding a slur, which I haven't done yet. So if I click on some notes and press S for slur, that will automatically make the notes play slightly longer, and if there's a legato sample for the instrument you're using, it will automatically trigger the legato sample for playback. So all of those kind of things are also quite useful. There's also, just to finish off, there's some lines down here. We're going to look at cues. There's a video feature. We'll look at that one, and a comments option. So there's all sorts of things and panels that you can use down there as well. Now, when you're adding things like slurs, you can see that this is adding and attaching to a particular note. So as I drag that with my mouse, it's jumping to each particular note. So it's not kind of sitting in the middle. It's literally jumping to each one so it's positioned correctly, and that's following our the default rules we've got for engraving. When you want to change the engraving, you can go to engrave mode. Now, engrave mode in here, this gives you graphical control over things. So when I choose a note, for example, I can't move the note with my mouse anymore, so I can't really change the music and the pitches. But when I choose things, I can graphically tweak, for example, things like this slur. And I can tweak the shoulders, I can tweak where this sits. It's not the way you want to do that. The way you want to do that is just by pressing F, and it will flip it. It's the same with beams. If you press F, then they will flip too. But if you want to move them graphically for some reason, then you can also graphically adjust things here as well and make things that don't quite look right. At the bottom in the properties panel, it will also update lots of these things and tell you what you've done. So if you're updating things and notes, then it will tell you the details of things down here as well. And you can reset things, of course, if you need to. So engrave mode is where you graphically change things. It's also where you can make other changes to the look of things. So this here is the graphical editing. This one here is frames. So the frames, if you choose this is a blue music frame. This is where the music wants to sit. So if I drag this, for example, here, then the music wants to sit in this frame here. And you'll see it's jumping slightly to snap into the size of this frame. And that's because Dorico's automatically working out how full this frame is, and therefore following the layout option rules, how much it should be justifying the page or not. So when I get to here, this one's saying, actually, I'm going to leave a big white space because you've not met, there's either a 60 or an 80% threshold, which is the default, for where it's going to sit on the page, whether it's going to justify or not, and that's in the layout options. So in the library menu, we've talked a bit about engraving options, notation options, there's also layout options. Layout options is also where you would set things like the paper size again, the rastral size that we set at the very beginning if you want a smaller staff size. So if you need to make the music fit, you could put this on a bigger size paper. You could use smaller size staves here. You can set those up, and you can see the layouts on the right hand side, so you can set those options for one or more layout as you go. But also in here in the vertical spacing, Dorico is setting the right amount of spacing for all of these. Also the little Galley view space option that we wanted to use earlier, and also down here whether it's justifying things. So don't fight and drag the staves in Dorico, because it's just going to take you a long time to do lots of individual pages. There are options to copy the spacing from one page to another, but those layout options will globally do it for all the pages automatically, so it's much quicker. But when you want to make little changes to things, you can grab these frames, you can resize them, you can put them wherever you want them to be on a page. So you can set up worksheets like this. You can make your own page templates, which is what I'd recommend for the kind of things you want on the page. So let's look at the beginning here. On the first page, we've got a page template up here, which has the project title. We've got over here the project composer. There's a space for the lyricist. I haven't added one yet. You can add all of these if you didn't do it at the beginning from the file project info dialog. So you can add into here all of the options that you want, and it will populate various areas. We've got a flow title. We will come back to flows. And at the bottom, we've got a space for the copyright details. If you want to change any of those, we can change the template. So the template is over here on the right hand side. We've got a default template and a first template. So when I double click on the first page template, you can edit this and you can put these tokens in. If you double click in here, by the way, you can right click and choose from all sorts of tokens. There's also a PDF available of all of the available tokens. But you can set up the page template exactly how you want it. You set it up as a left and a right page normally in case you've got page turns or you're going to start on a right or a left page. And that will be your first page template for the first page in your project. Then you've got the default template that it's going to use for all of the subsequent pages. So there's a page number in the top corner, there's a little flow title that you might want to use. Maybe you want to change that for project title, that's okay too. And then everything else will lay out correctly following all the same rules, apart from this one that I've changed. If you make a change to something, on the right hand side over here, Dorico will show you and say, look, there's a little red triangle to show you that there's an override. So if I choose that, right click and say remove all page overrides, it will go back to following the template. So this page and this one are not the same because there's different amounts of music on them, different amounts of spacing required, and it's just tipped this page into the threshold for wanting to do it. And actually you can see how close it is because it'll be a 60%. When this page reaches 60%, it would justify to the bottom. This one, 60.9, it's reached it. So when you're writing music, if you put some notes in this one here and they get lower, you see you'd get to a point where it would now justify the music. So don't fight and drag the staves and that kind of thing. Let Dorico do its thing. And if you need to, you can just tweak the settings. Maybe your favourite setting is actually 50%. If you don't want this one, then maybe actually it's 70%. You can tweak them and change those options. There's a video that we've done on creating leading layouts that you can find on our YouTube channel. So if you want to know more about layouts and things, then just let us know. So also in engrave mode, you can drag staves if you really need to, but don't. It's a last resort. You can also change the note spacing. You can get really picky if you want to about the note spacing and how those work. You can also create graphical slices of things if you need to do them. So if you need to cut out a little graphical slice to put into a project in Word or InDesign or anything else, then you can do those too. The other modes we have here, we have play mode and we have print mode. Play mode is where you're going to find all of the sounds that are happening. Now, they happen by default. If you start poking around in these menus, which you can do, you can tweak things. There's a little E button here where you can edit the instrument, and it will show you all of the instruments that are being used. So you can say into here, oh, look, here's all the instruments and things that we're using. I'm just going to turn that extra panel off. Here's the instruments we're using, and you can choose them from here. You can go to edit, and you can see them. So here's the violins here as well. So you can tweak all of these things if you want to. And you can play them from here. If you do, then they're also attached to expression maps, so make sure if you change your sound, you also change the expression map. And if you're going, I don't know what any of this means, then don't worry, it's not a problem. What you need to do is really probably use a playback template. So playback templates, Dorico's loading these automatically for you, and the idea is you don't need to do anything. Wanted to have a moment. I noticed there was some discussion about the sale as well. I don't think that's what started it, but sorry about that. So I think we're back. So I was saying playback templates. So the idea really is that you shouldn't really need to tweak the playback very much to get very good sounds out of Dorico. Dorico has lots of sounds that it's provided with it, and it will load its own default playback template for those. If you want to use other playback templates, and I have lots and lots of things listed, so you can use playback templates for all sorts of things like the BBCSO library from Spitfire and Note Performer and all sorts of things like that. You can use all sorts of playback templates, but where do you get them from? You can create your own, and there are videos on that, but really what I recommend is if you go again to the Getting Started page, when you go to the resources, on the resources section, or if you click on this playback templates link here, and I've put a link to this as well in the description underneath the video, you'll find, for example, the Garitan options are here. So if you already have Garitan with Finale, you don't need to buy it again, you already have it, don't worry. You can use that if you want to with Dorico. You can also, there's links in here to things like Note Performer if you want to use Note Performer if you're using that with Finale, and you can mix and match if you want to. Some Note Performer, some of our sounds, some of the Garitan ones, you can do those as well. But you download these playback templates, they will then appear in the playback template menu, and you can just choose them from here. So for example, you can have GPO5, and if you just press apply and close, Dorico will automatically load all of the sounds from Garatan instead of using the ones itself that it gives you by default. So playback templates, to start off with, it's very quick to move to other playback options if you need to. So you can get into fine control of these and do all sorts of things if you want to as well. I'm not going to go into those today, but those options do exist. Also in print mode here, so this is of course where you're going to print things to start off with, or also graphics. So if you want to make PDFs of things, this is where you'll find them. You can choose your layout, and you can then say printer or graphics, and you can go from there. So the playback things are all in here. The print things and the graphic export things are in there. But you'll also find when you're using any of these windows and things in Dorico that you've got menus at the top. So up here, for example, you also have an export option. If you want to export an audio file when you're talking about playback, then you can do that one as well. If you want to export a MusicXML file to go into another program, then you can do that from here as well. And that's also where you'll find the import options if you want to import MusicXML from Finale. I'm going to show you a few other things in Dorico that are kind of useful, I think, and maybe a bit different to some of the things that you might have used in some other programs. So the first is in setup mode. So we have here flows, and I'm going to click plus at the bottom here to add another flow. So I said flows are independent sections of music. So here we have flow 1, and if I click here now, we've got flow 2. So it's starting a new piece. And into flow 2, so now I have this selected, I can just tick and untick any of the players I do or don't want to show up here. So I can choose different instrumentation, I can have a different meter, I can have a different key signature. It won't impact flow 1, so you can have that as an ideas space, like I said, or it could be a new song, it could be a new movement. So flows can be very useful. It's a generic term because they can mean all sorts of different things. Also, and I'll just use a couple of other projects to show you some of these. So in this project that we're going to load now, it'll include things like a video file. So if you want to write music to picture, then you can do that. So what you'll do is each of the flows that you have in Dorico, you can right click on it and you can say video and attach a video file. And this project already has a video file. So I'll bring that one up. Here we go. Here's our little video file. So when you want to play things back in Dorico, there are some play controls up here on the right hand side. But if you just choose an item, for example this really big time signature, you can do those if you need them. Or if you choose a note or a bar line, you can just press the letter P for play. And Dorico will then play from that point. You can also press the space bar and it will stop, so it's effectively a pause. If you press the space bar again, it will play from wherever the playhead was. So at the moment it's in bar 40. You can leave the playhead on all the time if you want to, if you prefer, especially working with video, to always see where it is. But if I just press the space bar again, so it will carry on. These are actually note performer sounds, just to show you kind of example of how easy it is just to switch the sounds. These windows are resizable as well. But also in this project, what we have is a couple of other options that are probably fairly unique to Dorico, really. One is condensing. So in setup mode here, we've got a lot of players. So for example, there are 12 French horns and there's a lot of brass down here. And there's also double woodwinds, I think, at least. Oh, there's triple in some cases. So it's quite a large ensemble. Now, if you did all of that on, on a score, you end up with an individual staff for each instrument, and they're all quite small. And really what you want to be able to do is make a short score for that. So you don't want to have to copy and paste or kind of change things too much. You just want to make a short score. So what you do in Dorico is you go to the edit menu in condensing. And if I turn on condensing for this project, then you can see now I've got more space, so I can now have bigger staves with all of this fitting on. So now I've made another version of the score in the same project, which has slightly bigger staves, so that everything fits and I can, I can see it when you're conducting. That's probably the point for the conductor. So now if I scroll around in here, we'll see what it's done. So literally I've just turned this on, and it's taken for example, the two flute parts, and it's used, it looks like voices, it's used two rhythms, or I suppose there'd be layers in Finale. So it's added those automatically, and it's decided it needs to use 2 stem directions because the rhythms change at various points, and that would be the clearest option. Down here, where we've got the clarinets, these are, yes, the clarinets, they're all playing the same rhythm, so it's automatically put them on the same stem. You can change these options if you want to. You can decide how you want the condensing to happen, but these are the defaults that I've just turned on for this project. So for example here, the bassoons, it's automatically labelling 1 here and putting rests underneath automatically, and because the second one comes in here. Maybe I want to move that up a bit in engrave mode, but you can then see we've got all of the options, all the notes. It's very clear to see what's going on. Also in this project, at the bottom down here in the strings, if we move back to the beginning, I'm just going to switch into Galley view. And in Galley view, when we're viewing these, you see all of the instruments, of course, all the individual instruments. You can also see that the violin 2 here then gets an extra staff. And as you scroll around, you see it says violin 2 here and a little label, and then it's labelling them 1 and 2. And also the violas have an extra staff, and the cellos have an extra staff. So what's going on here is we have these Divisi points. I've added a shortcut so that I can turn these signposts on and off quickly. They also exist in the View menu in signposts. So here we've got these little Divisi ideas. So you can say, at this point, actually divide my violas up into 2 sections, please. So then you can write for the extra ones. And Dorico will automatically work out on each page how many staves it needs to display the music clearly, and you can decide whether you want them to be combined or not in the score and in the parts. So Divisi and Condensing are 2 very powerful options, but they're quite different with how things work to other programs. You don't, like I said, you don't need to copy and paste things around, you don't need to create new layouts or anything else. You can just turn these options on in the layouts that you're using. So those are 2 quite useful things. Another very useful thing is cues, when you want to do orchestral cues. Now, I suppose actually you could potentially use some of these for drum cues as well and that kind of thing when you've got drums and rhythms, and maybe if we have a little time we'll look into some of those as well. But let's start with orchestral cues. So in this score here, I say there's all sorts of there's all sorts of things going on, but we want to add cues. So on the right hand side we click on this little ear symbol for cues, and Dorico can tell us, it can suggest that when somebody's been resting for a certain period of time, 30 seconds is the default, and I press the update, it's going to tell us all the people that might want a cue because they haven't been playing for a while. So the flutes in bar 26 haven't been playing for 41 seconds. And as you go through the piece, you can choose these and it will tell you, it's just suggesting all of the places with these little red areas they might want a cue because they've been resting for a while. So at the bottom here, in the violas in bar 277, they have been resting for 45 seconds, so let's give them a cue. So if I choose this bar here, so I've selected that one, and I'm going to also shift select this one here. So I've chosen a range of these 5 bars. I'm going to cue from this violin part here. So you can use, it says here are the instruments who are playing, so you can use these if you want to as a suggestion. So violin 1 is one of them. And there's a button to create cue. I'm going to use the shortcut Shift U for cues. I'm going to start typing violin 1 because it was one of the suggestions. And now I've got a little signpost to tell me there is a cue. The little red area has gone away. Now I want to go and look at this viola part. So I'm just going to press W, which is going to jump me into the correct part of the viola part here, and now I can see the cue. So I don't need to copy the notes. They're automatically made small. It's automatically put the rests in underneath. Effectively looks like a second voice. It's added a clef change at the moment, and it's added a little label. Now these notes are grabbed dynamically from the violin part. So if Schubert comes back and finishes his 8th and changes the violin part, the cues would also update at that point. So you don't need to kind of only wait till the end of the project to do them. Do them whenever you like, and they will automatically update as the violin part changes. But there might be things that you want to tweak just for this cue. So these are global preferences that you can change, and I'm just going to show you a few overrides. So if you always want to show slurs, turn them on in the global preferences. If you only want to show slurs here, then you can just turn on this little toggle and say show slurs. There you go. We get some little slur marks. You can click to show dynamics, for example, if you wanted to, if there were any. There aren't any at that point, so that's not going to make any difference. Lyrics, if there were any, ornaments, the various other options if you want them. Also transpose clef, so maybe we don't need a transpose clef. So the viola will probably cope reading that one fine, but maybe because of the space it's a bit too high. So you can also say actually do an octave shift and bring it down an octave. So it's now labelled it violin 1/8 VA, so that it knows that it's octave shifted it, but it's brought it into the staff just for engraving space reasons. You can also do things like, say, make these a rhythmic cue, and you can set how far off the staff they are. So you can also say you want to use rhythmic slashes for these if they're and how far away they are. So you can set a position if you want to, although the slashes would normally sit at the top anyway, so you don't want to use all these options at the same time. But you can use these options if you need to. Like I said, these are just individual overrides, and there's a global preference option for these as well. So adding cues is a really quick and dynamic way of doing it, because now if you make a mistake in the violin part and go and change it, the cues will also update as well, which will save you quite a lot of time. So it's another neat feature that you've got in Dorico should you need it. Just while let's go back to Monday's project and show you a few other things that are quite useful. I haven't done anything with drums, and because there were some questions I had about drums after the session we did last week, I'll just do a little bit on here. So when you're doing drum input, this is for the drum kit. And now I think we should probably do another session on drum input. There is one that's called Drums in 1 Minute video on our YouTube channel, and also for percussion, for orchestral percussion. So maybe we won't go into that one right now. We can do all of the orchestral percussion stuff. Maybe let's do a new video on that one for you, a new live stream if that would be useful. But just while we think about it on drum kit notation. So here, now you've got a little caret line for one of the items on the drum kit. Let me just zoom in a bit here. So I can now use the arrow keys, and I can move around to all of the various bits of the kit. So the kick drum, snare drum, etc. So when you add notes into here, it will automatically put the notes in and give you different flags and different stems. I'm going to do it with my MIDI keyboard. So the way I have mine set up in the preferences is that my MIDI keyboard is going to give me bass drum down here, 2 octaves below middle C. So I've got bass and snare down here, and rim shots. So there's different keys for those. And there's also, if I just go back a couple of bars, if I use let's say we want some eighth notes, we'll do a simple drum kit and press F sharp, then I can get the hi-hats. I didn't need to tell it I was using a different voice. The hi-hats already know that they use a different voice, different stem direction. And if you use B flat, then you'll get open hi-hats as well. So those kind of things, of course, crash cymbal and all of those kind of things. So you can use those to do note input for drums. Now, you might not agree whether the stems go up or down for snare drum. You can change them. You can tweak your kit. You might not agree exactly where these hi-hats want to be. Let's make that a bit longer. So you can tweak all of the options in your drum kit. I won't go into all the details, but for the drum kit player here, there's an option for edit the percussion kit. And the edit percussion kit dialog here has the whole kit in here, including the snare drum. It tells you the stem directions, so you can switch it. It tells you all the techniques for all of these and the edit percussion playing techniques, so you can tweak things. If you've imported something and it looks a bit like this, you can also change it in the notation options for percussion. You can truncate to shortest duration. You can tidy up drum parts very quickly. So there's all sorts of options for those. You can edit rests and remove them. If you need to remove rests in any part, just use the edit menu and remove rests. I like this function so much, I've set my own shortcut for it because I do use that one a fair bit. But don't remove rests most of the time. I've seen a few people who've been removing whole bars rest, and then Dorico doesn't have anything else to space them on and they all get squished up. So really what you should be doing if you don't want to show bars rest is you can do it in here in the players section. For bar rests and multi-bar rests, just don't show bar rests in empty bars, and it will just turn them all off for you. Use that option instead of actually individually removing all the rests. But for individual cases for removing a rest, use edit remove rests. Also, somebody asked about lyrics. I don't have... the singer's not doing anything, so let's grab them some notes. Let's say you can have these bits from the piano, and these bits here. So you can Alt-click, which will copy them, or you can cut them and paste, or you can copy to staff above. There's all sorts of options for getting those in, but I just held down Option or Alt and clicked in the voice part up here. You could also do things like, let's say we want to grab some of the notes from here to give to the singer. You could use filters, so you could filter out a middle note or a top note or that kind of thing. And if you go to the edit menu, there's filters and there's all sorts of things you can filter. When you can't find something in any of these menus, just use J. Press the letter J and you get the jump bar. The jump bar remembers the last thing I did, which was beam together. I don't remember when that was, but I did. I'm just going to press delete and delete that. Now I can type the thing that I want. I want to filter. And it says, okay, what do you want to filter? And it's giving me some options. I'm going to say I probably want, let's say not the top note, but maybe I want the second note. So give me filter the second note. Now I've actually done this a few times, so I've set a shortcut for it, F2. So I filter the second. And you can set your own little shortcuts for things like that as well, so if there are things you want. So instead of going to a menu and setting things in there, you can also set the jump bar to remember things for you. So if I just press escape for a minute, because I've done it before, I know now if I press the J for the jump bar and press F2, then it would filter the second or, the second note or bottom note. So I'm doing second from bottom, that was the filter I've selected, and now I've just got those, so I can alt-click them, I can move them, I can whatever for the singers. So filtering, but all sorts of things. If you can't find something in Dorico, press J and then start typing, and you'll probably find one of the options in there. And because it then remembers the last thing you did, it's now the filter that I've got selected for something else as well when I want it in future. Now when you want to add some lyrics, you can choose a note, you can press Shift-L for lyrics, and you can type the lyrics. If I press the hyphen, then it will move on so that it will put in a hyphen for me, and if I press the space bar, then it will add a melisma line. If I was doing this and I type Shift-L, you see it said 1, that's verse 1. So if I press the down arrow, then this is verse 2. That goes here. Now, you don't want to type all of your lyrics out, so you can also copy and paste them. So if you've typed them in once somewhere in Dorico or in Microsoft Word or something else, you can select them in Microsoft Word. You probably want to add the hyphens before you do anything in Dorico. So add the hyphens in Word or use an online hyphenator or whatever you want to use, and then you can just paste each syllable, and it will automatically know that's a tied note, so it will move on and that kind of thing. It's very clever. And then when you want to do things like add a chorus and you do Shift-L, you can press the up arrow, and now it says C. So this is the chorus, and that will be italicized and automatically be put between verse 1 and 2. So now if I just press W to go to the soprano part, you can see the chorus is in the middle here. Now, because the soprano is also doing song 1 and song 2, it's automatically putting those flows on the same page as well. So for any of the parts we've created, here's the one that we had, which also had the piano part in it. This one's run out of space, so it's doing it on the second page. What's the violin part doing? Yep, flow 1, flow 2. Now, the violin doesn't exist in here, so it's automatically tacit because I unticked it from setup mode. So in setup mode, flow 1, flow 2 doesn't have a violin, so they're automatically tacit in their parts. So Dorico's doing a lot of these kind of layout things automatically for you. I've not had to do any manual page formatting or anything else of those either. They've worked quite well. When you want to import things into Dorico or export them from Finale, we've written a blog article about importing and exporting. In fact, I think I just need to go back a page for a second. Yes. So there's on our blog, blog.dorico.com. There's a link in the description. There's an article about translating Finale projects to Dorico. So the best option isn't to open a Mus or a MusX file, unfortunately, because that file format doesn't tell us the kind of information we need to know to do all of the layout. But by contrast, MusicXML does do that. It does tell us all of the things that we need to lay things out. Now, it's not going to be exact, and there's a few things maybe we can add to make things even better, but it will get you a long way into importing things. So I would recommend, for archiving any projects, whether it's Dorico or Finale, but export them as well as the Finale file you've got and you've saved, because Finale still works, so you can still use Finale, that's no problem. But if you want to move it to somewhere else, export a MusicXML file, because MusicXML can be opened in more than 200 other programs. Also export a PDF file, because PDF's not going anywhere, so you can then use the PDF and you can print the PDF, so that you've got a version of that without needing any other notation software at all. You can just print the PDF. Now, there are batch options for this. So if you read our guide, it says here, and have a look at this, then in here there are options in Finale to export your projects and to also batch export. So there's a translate folder to MusicXML. So if you've got all your files, and it can go subfolders as well, on your hard drive, it can automatically batch export all of those as MusicXML so that you've got them as a safety option that you can open in other programs. There's also a similar option in Sibelius that you can do. There's a plugin you can use for that one if you want to. And then it tells you here how to import your projects into Dorico. Now, when you're importing things into Dorico, before you import them, go to the Dorico preferences, or on a PC it's edit preferences. And in here, there's a MusicXML import option. And what this is saying is there's all sorts of different things that we can import, different categories of things, articulations, accidentals, note durations, tuplets. We haven't done tuplets today, sorry. Various things. Now, if you've spent a long time on these options in Finale and putting them exactly where you want them to be, for example, a dynamic placement, make sure you tick this option, and Dorico will then import that option from the MusicXML file. If you haven't, if you've just done some basic note input in Finale, in Sibelius, in something else, and you haven't spent time on all of these things and putting them in exactly the right places, don't tick the box, and Dorico will use its own rules. So if you're setting up your template for how you want things to look in Dorico, don't tick any of these boxes, and when you import the MusicXML, it will use the options in your template for how to make those display. So you get kind of two options, if you like, for all of these categories of things. Set what you want first, and then when you apply that and then go to File, Import if you've already got a project open, or you can just go File, Open and open a MusicXML file if you're doing it into a blank file, and you can then import those, and you choose then, do you want the options out of the file, or do you want the options that Dorico can set for those? So that's covered in this dialogue here. There's also a video here as well at the bottom about this. So it's part 3 of that little video series for importing MusicXML into Dorico and having a look at how those kind of things will work. So I just thought kind of, it was useful to mention some of those. And of course, you've also got the PDF so you can print from those. But also don't on day one think, well, I know, I'll batch export everything and import it all into Dorico. It may look slightly different. You may need to, for example, choose the Finale fonts that you want to, if you were using those in Finale and you want the same look in Dorico. But also, it's not really the best way to learn Dorico. Like I said at the very, very beginning, the best way to learn Dorico is just to go to the Getting Started page and use examples like this First Steps guide, because the First Steps guide will give you that first steps, but they're kind of the basic information about where to find things, how to do things in Dorico, and then when you do come to import your music, you've got a good grounding then in how things work and how to put things together. So I think I'm just going to do one last thing, because I said I didn't do tuplets, and I meant to, and somebody asked me about them in a previous session. So let's just do tuplets and have a quick recap, and then see if there's any other questions as well. So in this bar here, when we want to do tuplets, we've got the caret line on because we're inputting notes. There's a button for tuplets. Now there is one on the left hand side over here. There's a little button here for triplets. So it says it's a ratio 3 in the time of 2. So you can press that button. I'm just going to press the shortcut, which is the semicolon button, and it gives me a popover. So now I can say, for example, I could type 3:2, or actually for triplets, I can just type 3. Now, because I had this selected, this note duration selected to start off with, it will now give me 3 quarter notes. So now I can input those notes, and it's choosing the next 3 notes relative to the last note I'd input, so that's why it's up here. And I can enter those. Now, if I was doing this and carrying on, tuplets in Dorico are sticky. So I'm going to say 8th notes. Oh, sorry. I'm going to say 8th notes this time. So I'll press 8th notes, turn on my tuplets, say I want triplets. There we go. And so now let's put that down an octave. So they're sticky. They stay on until you say stop. And I can say stop by turning off note input completely, or if I want to carry on with note input, I can press shift and semicolon, or colon if you like, and that will then turn off tuplets. So I've now got standard 8th notes. You can do this retrospectively. So if I choose this 3 here and delete it, just press delete, it's deleted them. If I do it with insert mode turned on, then it will keep all the notes as well. So you've got very good controls. If I choose these notes here and press the semicolon button or this tuplet button, then it will say, oh, triplets. Yeah, there you go. So you can do those as well. You can also, in Dorico, you can do tuplets over bar lines, but don't do that kind of thing. I don't think people probably want to play them very much, but if you want to, then you can do these, and you can also beam them over bar lines and that kind of thing. So if you want to do that kind of notation, it's not a problem. You can do those in Dorico as well. Now, you've also got options for other tuplets and nested tuplets in the same way, but you will need to specify ratios. So in this bar here, if we say we want to do some, let's say 16ths this time, we're going to say we want 7 in the time of 8, then you will need to specify that as a ratio. But you can do that, and also you can do nested tuplets. So when you're inside a tuplet, you can start another one, and you can have a tuplet inside a tuplet should you want to, and don't forget that they're sticky, so they will stay on. So nested tuplets and flipping things, is it just F? So you can flip those, you can flip these, you can flip beams. You know, there's all sorts of options for those as well if you want to move things. And then, like I said earlier, press S for a slur. So I just thought covering a little bit of tuplets, a little bit of drums, you know, that kind of thing. Now, when you want to get help for things, I can heartily recommend our manual. So from the hub, you can get the manual. You can also go to steinberg.help, or you can Google things. So if I go to steinberg.help, that's where you'll also find our manual. Also exists in the menu in Dorico. There's a help menu here in Dorico, and you can find the manual from there. So if you search for something, you'll find it there, whether you're searching in our help or you're searching on Google or your favorite search engine. If you do search on Google, you'll also find some of our videos. So our YouTube channel, there's a link in the description at the bottom. The YouTube channel has loads and loads of useful videos, but you'll also find out, of course, they'll pop up on Google. So if you're looking for something, you might find those. You can get in touch on our forum if you want to come and chat to us. So when we started at the beginning today, we started from the Dorico Hub. And in the Dorico Hub, in the Learn section, there was the manual we've just talked about and the forum link, so you can talk to us on there as well. There's also Facebook groups. There's a Facebook group we've had running for quite a long time, which has some very useful people in there. There's also a new Facebook group that some people have started for people who have moving from Finale, and they also want to learn lots of things, and they don't want to feel silly asking daft questions. There's no such thing as a daft question. You can ask that in the Dorico group as well, but if you want to use that group, you can use one or other of those groups if you want them. There's also trainers available if you want them, and there's courses that you can buy online. So on our resources page, there's all sorts of information on here as well, tutorials that you can get. So, for example, there's a Dorico Basics notation tool course here on notationcentral.com. There's a Groove 3 set of videos. There's a set here, which is, this one actually links to gumroad.com, but it's actually the same series that's on Udemy that some people like, which is by Dr. Luke Carlson. So if you want to purchase a video set because you want kind of a third-party take on how some of these things work, or you like the way those things are structured, you can use that one as well. You can use our YouTube channel. So there's all sorts of things. Our YouTube channel, of course, is free. The other options are also available. You can book a switch session if you want to talk to somebody directly. There's education options for flashcards and worksheets and boom whackers, and you can download some of those things from there. The quick reference card we've talked about. If you want to book a trainer, I'm going to be adding more options to this page as well for some other languages as well, for people who, if you want to get training from people, then we can find you somebody that way as well, if that would be useful. And of course, all of the other help information. So there's Facebook groups in various languages that you can join. Another link to our forum, and the support team. We have a support team as well. So if you want to raise a ticket, if you've got any questions, then you can do that and get in touch with them as well. There's also third-party resources. So there's a Dorico book. If you prefer to flick through a book and learn things that way, you can do that from Darren Jones here. There is a Stream Deck profiles. So if you're into your tech, there's a hardware a device with buttons on it that you can use to fire off shortcuts if you want to use that one. There's keyboard covers and those kind of things. So if you want stickers for your keyboard or that kind of thing, then to remind you of shortcuts, you can use those as well. If you're really into plugin type tools and that kind of thing, and scripting things, there's also an option here that you can look at for that. And there's a video again on our YouTube channel that you can look at for things like that. There's playback templates, as we said earlier, for all sorts of libraries, from VSL, from Spitfire, from Orchestral tools and others. So you click on that link if you want to any playback templates and some additional fonts. So if you want to use all the Finale ones are installed anyway, they're all usable with Dorico. But if you want any extra fonts, then there's also places you can buy those from as well. So it should be hopefully a good roundup. So let me just see if there's any comments or anything else anything I've missed. Anything that we want to be talking about. I didn't have an overlay on today to show you keys that are being pressed. I wasn't going to maybe kind of, get you to learn all of the shortcuts I was using today, but so apologies. Maybe in some of the future sessions, if you'd like me to put an overlay on so you can see exactly which buttons I'm pressing and which keys, yeah, we can do that too if you want to. Let me just have a quick check. There was a question about voice colors. So I haven't really done voices today in Dorico. So let's say in this piano part we wanted to do voices. So I'm just going to go to the view menu and the note and rest colours, and you see normally it's on notes out of range. You'll see, oh, there's one. This violin note down here is out of range. If you change the note and rest colours to voice colours, voices are our way of doing different rhythms on the same staff. So you can see even in the drum part here it's using some different rhythms, some different voices. Excuse me. Now, to start off with when you do voices in Dorico, you just press Shift V once. And that gives you an additional voice. So now I can add a note here, which would now sit, and I can put it at the bottom. I can now put this rhythm underneath, so I can have two different rhythms on the same staff, and they're in different colours. Now I've got two on this voice, on this instrument. Whenever I need them later on, like over here, I can just press the V. Don't press Shift V again. If you do that, you'll end up with another colour, and things get very, very colourful, and you don't want that. But you can add another voice, so you can put another note down here if you want to. You can create dotted notes, by the way, just by double tapping the note. So if I want to enter a note here and I want an eighth note, I press 5. If I wanted a dotted eighth note, I press 55. So it's a neat little shortcut. But yes, so voices, you can use those if you want. They're more common probably for piano, guitar, that kind of thing. You can have an unlimited number of voices in Dorico, unlimited number of upstem and downstem voices, that's no problem. You don't really need them for other instruments because you'll probably use condensing for those. So for two flutes, for example, you don't need to put them in two voices. You can just write for two flutes on two staves and have the condensing option do it for you. Very quickly, we also haven't really looked at things like chord symbols. So let's use these. If you want to enter chord symbols, let's say for the piano, you can press Shift Q, and you can just type in a chord. So if I wanted to type in a chord, I could just say, C or 5, that kind of thing, and it would put in the chord symbol for me. If I wasn't sure what the chord symbol was, then when I do Shift Q, I can press notes on my MIDI keyboard. So just this one. If I just go like that, then it will write the chord symbol for me. So if you want to use a MIDI keyboard to do your note input, you can do that. You can also use the jump bar, and you can say generate chord symbols from the selection, and it will ask you how often you want to do it and that kind of thing, and then it will put chord symbols in, which actually in this range was probably going to be daft. I'll just do one of them because otherwise it's going to say, but there's too many in this bar, so which one do you want to use? I'll just put one of them in. So you can do that, and you can have it generate chord symbols for you. Now when you're doing chord symbols though, they will appear or not appear in various places. Let's enter a few in here. So let's say we wanted a G, F and a D7. Keep it simple for a minute. How the chord symbols display is all down to some options we have up here in the library menu for engraving options. And we have a dialog here with lots of chord symbols in. Now you can choose your kind of default presets, so Nashville if you want Nashville numbers, or Indiana, or you want a New York style, or you want a jazz standards real book style. So you can choose various options up here, and then there's a whole bunch of presets underneath that you can then choose for how you want it. And so you can apply those and get them to display the way you want them. This also includes things like whether you've got slashes and whether they're underneath or next to each other. It will also include if you've got things like extensions and that kind of thing on there. So if you add anything else in here, and including with things with brackets and that kind of thing, then they'll be there. If you're in engrave mode, you can double click on these and you can edit all of the individual bits of these chord symbols as well if you needed to. But the chords themselves will automatically display for all rhythm instruments. So in this one, I've got a piano part here. If I was to just add, for example, a guitar part, so I'll just say guitar. In fact, we'll have a jazz guitar because that will make a bit more sense than guitar on, won't it? I should probably have used the search. So now the jazz guitar, which at the moment is at the bottom because I haven't told it to go anywhere else, has automatically got the chord symbols. And that's because it's a rhythm instrument. So I don't need to copy the chord symbols to there. It's a rhythm instrument, so it will automatically get them. So now you just might want to, for example, for the guitarist, do things like slashes. So I'm going to press Shift R for repeats and type slash, and I'll automatically get slashes at that point. So you can also decide that any other instrument wants them. So if you had a soloist, the violin is going to solo maybe for a couple of bars, maybe just in this bar here. Then you can also do things with these as well. So, and there are panels to add these kind of things as well. So we've got all of the rhythm slashes and things in here, create slash regions, numbered bars, bar repeats, this kind of thing. But you can say, I want to put some slashes in here for the violin part, and then in setup mode, you can tell the violin that when they for chord symbols, when they have a chord symbol or a slash region, then they're also allowed the chord symbols and they'll just pop in automatically. So they will display as long as there is a slash region like this. So you don't need to copy and paste them between the instruments. You can copy and paste them later in the project, of course. So if you choose one here, one of my favorite shortcuts is select more. I'm going to do, it's in the edit menu and it's select more. So I've chosen something and I want to select more of it. So I'm going to hit that shortcut and it said, okay, I've now selected more in this same bar. If I hit the same shortcut again, then it's going to select more of the same item. And now I can just paste them in somewhere else. So I now get the chord symbols later as well. Whoops, sorry, fat fingers on my trackpad. So it now pastes them in later as well. So select more is really useful. Also really useful for voices. So we've done voices here. If I select this one note and I do select more, it selects more of that same note. If I do select more again, it also selects this one over here because it's selecting more in the same voice. If I select this note and this note, then I've got two voices selected. So when I do select more, it's selecting everything in that bar because it's just selecting those. So select more, it's really useful. Sorry. Anyway, let me now answer a couple of quick questions. The properties panel is the little black bar at the bottom. It is. Command 8 is the way you open that, or Control 8. But also right at the bottom down here, this is the properties panel. Now it's not showing me anything because there's nothing selected. So if I select something like a note, here are all the properties of the thing I've selected. If I choose a chord symbol, here are the properties of the chord symbol. If I choose a slur, then here are the properties of the slur. So that's the properties panel at the bottom. It's alongside these other options. So the key editor can be down here, and the piano roll can be, the piano keyboard can be down here, but the properties panel is down there. Command 8 is the shortcut to the default shortcut to show and hide it, and Command 9 will do the same for that panel over there if you need to hide that one. Let me have a look. I think we can. The questions are mostly being answered. There was a quick question about the parts, I think, and the soprano and the piano. So the full score here, I've got a soprano part here, and if I look in the soprano part, of course I've got all the notes and everything I've entered. I'm just going to turn these off with my little shortcut for signposts because I don't need the chords. Now in the piano part, we've got all of the notes from the piano part, but in the combined soprano and piano part, this is the same note and the same information that we had from both of these parts. So these are all linked. So maybe, for example, you want to make this piano part smaller in this part. So if you right-click and say staff size, let's say 75%, then the piano part is now 75% of the size in this layout, but it's still all the same notes, they still all play, and they're all exactly the same notes as they are in this piano part here, which is full size, and this full score here. So you can easily make a piano part that you have in the score also exist in the soprano part. Maybe the piano is just for a rehearsal, you don't want it in the score, That's also possible. If you choose the full score, you can untick the piano part here, and it's now not in the score, but it is still in the piano part for the pianist and the soprano and piano part, which may be for a rehearsal. So you could do that. If you need other options, you can, of course, also cue things. So if you needed, for example, in the piano part, you needed to cue, oh sorry, it was the full score, I turned it off. If you wanted to cue the soprano singer, for example, you could do that. I mean, it doesn't make sense in this case, but let's say, where would it make sense? It doesn't at all. So let's say we'll take these notes out. Let's say we want to cue that one in there. So I can say, at this point here, cue the soprano. So now in the piano part, I'll get the cue for the soprano, and you can choose if you want the short label or the big label, and you can choose whether you want the lyrics and that kind of thing. So you can add cues into the part as well, depending on the type of layout you want. I know it was when somebody asked earlier in the comments as well, so I think it was Birch Seymour. Yes, if that doesn't answer all of your questions, then let me know. If you also have any questions, and I'm going to get a lot of questions, so you're going to have to bear with me for an answer on some of these, but you can email me on discoverdorico@steinberg.de, and I'll answer those. But there's going to be a little bit of a backlog. You may also want to try maybe our Facebook page or our forum, because there's more people who can answer those, and also the community can help answer some of those questions as well. So there's lots of places you can get help. How to delete some chord symbols of just one instrument? Yes, you can hide them in the properties panel. Daniel's doing a good job of answering these, so I don't think I need to answer any more of those questions. But yes, and there's also chord regions as well. So if you've got a sax player who's playing only for one bit of it, you can add a chord region just to show the chords at that point as well. And also the slashes will hide notes. So if you have a solo, for example, maybe this piano part here is a solo that you want to hear, but you don't want to see it, then when you add a slash region, then it will cover up the notes. They will still play, but you just won't see them because they're behind the slashes, which can be quite useful. So then when you go File, Export, and you export an audio file, you will hear the solo, but it won't appear in the parts, so they can make up their own. There was a quick question about flashcards and how to get those. So if you go to our Getting Started page, so it's in the description at the bottom of this video. If you go to the Getting Started page, blog.dorico.com/getting started, and then scroll down a bit, then you'll find in here download shortcut cards and posters, or it will take you to the quick reference card, playback templates, the forum. But if you go to the resources page here, then the resources page, there's all sorts of things on this one, and this one includes flashcards and worksheets in case you want those ones. So I think, let me just check in if there's anything that we've missed. I can see there's been a lot of questions and comments. Hopefully you can find a lot of the things that you want to find, and if not, like I said, you can ask us questions. First Steps Guide, I would recommend it definitely. Batch exporting all of your files as XML. There's also a batch export option for PDFs as well. So the graphics plugin in Finale, you can batch export as PDFs as well if you want to do that one. Maybe we can add more of this information onto our blog as well if that would be useful. And yes, you can get in touch with us if you've got any questions or anything else. I haven't mentioned today so far, but there is also an iPad version of Dorico. So if you also want to take the same files that you're using on the desktop, so on the Mac or PC, you can also put those on the iPad version of Dorico. The iPad version you can download for free. It's got a player limit, so you can only write for 8 players initially, 12 players if you want to sign in with a free Steinberg account. And then there is a subscription option, or as a lifetime unlock option, as they call it, to pay for, if you want to use an unlimited number of players and more features on the iPad. But even if you don't, even on the free version, you can take a project like this one, and you could put that on the iPad. It's the same file format, just use iCloud or Dropbox or however you want to move the file around. Same file format between Mac, PC and iPad, and you can then use that on the iPad and take it with you. And the iPad also has a sheet music reader option, so you just do a 4-finger tap on the screen and you'll get a sheet music reader, and you can just tap on the screen so that it turns pages for you, and you can annotate with your Apple Pencil and things like that as well. I would recommend using a QWERTY keyboard if you are using the iPad for note input. That is a very good option, and you can also use a MIDI keyboard if you want to. So if you're traveling and you're just taking an iPad with you, then you can edit all your files, but you can also be creative and compose on there as well. It's all very similar to the desktop version. So I think we're okay. I mean, there's lots of other things we could talk about, so I think we will do some more of these sessions. Let me know what kind of features would be useful. And like I said, there are a whole bunch of videos already. So there's some on big band, there's some on orchestral writing and how to create a symphony, there's some on engraving and layout, there's some on playback, and we'll be doing more of those videos on our YouTube channel. So make sure you subscribe to the channel and click the little bell icon, and then you'll be notified automatically when we have a new video available, and also of course when we do another one of these live streams. So thank you very much for watching. Sorry about the little glitch in the middle on the stream there, and please make sure you get help with from any of those sources if you need them. Don't suffer. Just ask us if you have any questions. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the next session. Thank you very much.